Welcome into the college football smothered and covered weekend feast. This is the episode where we share the best of the week that was on college football smothered and covered. So you might see me dressed up in different shirts or all that jazz, but rest assured, this is just a highlight show. BetOnline is your number one source for summer sports this season, whether it be golf, NASCAR, Major League Baseball, whatever. They've got you covered with all the latest stats, news to follow your favorite teams. You can see lines, you can see odds, you can see player props, you can see all of it over at BetOnline. So go to betonline.ag, betonline.ag on your mobile browser or on the web. betonline.ag, where the game starts. Joined now by a good friend. You know him from the Daily Wire. You know him from the Crain and Company. He is Jake Crain. Jake, what's up, man?
Barrett, what is up, brother? It's always a pleasure to join you, my friend, and another day closer to kickoff. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, you know what? There's no offseason in this sport because, honestly, there's always some sort of news trigger, and it's not structured like the NBA or the NFL. You never know what you're going to get. So we got Colorado. We get Colorado, and look, the portal's closed. They lost Cormani McClain. Deion's Deion. You got Shedeur ripping on former players. Just overall, what is your take of the Buffs right now?
Well, we're talking about them, so it's
exactly.
They say no pub is bad pub. Now I don't necessarily believe that, but I think. And I say this all the time on the show, I think multiple things can be true at once. Like on one hand, now that players want it in the business, and look, guys have been getting cut for a long time. I mean, it's amazing people forget the term processed, where that came from. And
he said it. That's the one thing is Deion actually said it.
He said it. But, on one hand, as a player, you can't cry about wanting in the business on one hand, and then when you get in the business, cry about the negative side of it. It's actually a great life lesson. Well, you want to get paid to play, right? Okay, that's fine. Well, you're expendable. Like if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're open to criticism. And I would much rather, and this happens everywhere, but it doesn't happen, it's not broadcast. Like there's you don't see the cameras in the meetings where this happens. I've got no problem with the coach saying, hey man, look, the best interest for you as a player and for us as a program is for you to transfer. And now you have freedom in the transfer portal where it's never been easier. Hell, you can actually probably make more money going somewhere else, maybe even going down to accumulate more money as opposed to staying. I've got no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is when you go on social media, regardless if that player said something or not, you are the head coach. That should be above you. It does look somewhat immature to me. So on one hand, I don't think Deion is wrong telling a guy to transfer and then that guy doesn't transfer and you don't practice him. I tried to tell you and you didn't listen. So I'm not going to put our team's well-being beneath yours when it comes to me getting paid to win games. This is how I put food on my family's table. So, and in Deion, Deion has enough money where he doesn't have to do it, but that's not the point. So I think, multiple things can be true at once. As far as Shedeur Sanders, it's just a bad business decision. You ain't got to like the guy. You can think the guy sucks, but I don't know how you look at what just happened to Spencer Rattler, where supposedly NFL GMs dropped him down because of a documentary that he made when he was 17 years old, and the guy's done nothing but change his mental makeup, and I think he's going to be better for it. And look, I said on the show, can Shedeur get away with more? Yeah, he can. Number one, he's Shedeur Sanders, right? Number two, the quarterback crop that will be coming out next year is not nearly as deep as the one that came out this year. So maybe he can afford a little bit of social media prowess, I guess is the best way to put it. But at the end of the day, it's just a bad business decision. No NFL GM is going to look at that and be like, God, I want to definitely want to draft him top 5 now. Like he's making fun of an FCS player now. So again, we're talking about him. That's great. But I'm telling you, Barrett, if they're not better up front, they're going to get beat by North Dakota State game 1, and they're not going to win 4 games.
No, I 100% agree, but I think they are going to be better up front because honestly, they can't be worse, and a lot of those guys are gone. So that's one thing, and you're right about this, and I said this on the show too. It's like, okay, Deion came in with the Louis Vuitton and all that other stuff, and said, hey, look, some of you guys are not good enough to play here, and you have to be okay if you're not one of those guys. Like just flat out, you have to be. But I think there's a reason, BetOnline sponsors the show, and they went,
same here.
Shedeur was the likely number 1 pick on Monday of last week. On Wednesday, he was the 3rd most likely. And it's because of this. It's not like anything drastically changed, right? It's because you have to be smarter. You have to represent your school and your family better. And this is the one thing with Shedeur. Like the Deion stuff was unnecessary too, totally unnecessary. And that's a separate conversation. But with Shedeur, you've had the same head coach for 22 years.
Yeah.
Like Deion's been your head coach for 22 years. You're not only representing the family, you're representing the school, and you're the leader of that program. You have to be smarter than that. So the Deion talking on social media to me is almost secondary. It's the fact that maybe he's just not coaching in a way where his leaders know how to represent the school. And I can't imagine what that's going to be like next year when he's going to have a quarterback who does not carry the Sanders name.
Yeah, like, can you imagine Jalen Milroe saying that? Like, can you imagine like Carson Beck saying that? Like, it's here's what's I
Kirby
think
Smart would lose it.
Oh, he'd lose his mind because again, you're doing nothing but hurting us. And again, you can have your personal opinions. And look, man, we live in America. If you want to tweet something, do it. But I can still say it's a bad business decision. To the Deion thing quickly, though, I would much rather, like, to me, what Deion did telling the guy to transfer, that was actually love. You want to know what's evil? What's evil is bringing the guy in and saying, no, man, you don't need to transfer. You can play here. You're going to get a shot. And then just hanging him around so you can have some third string guy in case there's anybody that gets hurt and really not playing him. That is the evil way to do it. But if you're Shedeur, here's where I think NFL GMs and coaches worry. Like, you're in college football, you're Deion Sanders' kid, and you're a hell of a player. I don't think anybody can doubt Shedeur Sanders is a pretty daggum good football player, pretty good quarterback. But when you walk in that NFL locker room, they don't care that you're Deion Sanders' son. Are you kidding me? That's the thing with Caleb Williams. You'll be the face of the franchise and things like that, but you're walking into a totally different. Oh, this is full-grown men. These are 30-something-year-old men that rely on you being the quarterback to do your job on and off the field, so they can keep living the lifestyle and change their family's trajectories for most of them. So you want to talk about alienating people really quickly or getting put in your place very quickly? You go try and pull that in the NFL, and that locker room has a way of eating you alive, buddy. It's happened many, many times. So it's something that, and I hope Shedeur can use it as a lesson. I hope it's a learning lesson. Now, Willie, I don't know. I don't know if there's much you can tell Shedeur Sanders right now that he's going to take serious from a, hey, you need to get better at this standpoint.
Well, yeah, I agree. And, we saw that last week because he got criticized for all of this. And then that night had a Twitter space for 15, 20 minutes where him and his buddies, all they did was rip on this kid. It's like, dude, you have to be better than this.
Like, who's around you? You got to have better friends. It's like Deshaun Watson.
Yes,
like, why are you going to massage parlors? You're a rich, good-looking NFL quarterback, dude. Stop doing it. Or like Patrick Mahomes' dad, somebody get this man an Uber. Or somebody go pick this guy up. Like, you have the worst friends ever.
It's the 100% the truth. It's what goes back to something that I've said for a long time. Every organization, whether it's an architecture firm, a football program, does not matter. They need to have a VP of common sense. Where in an ideal world, they don't say anything. In a perfect world, that dude just sits in the corner of a board meeting and doesn't say a damn word ever until somebody has a stupid idea.
Yeah, well, and it's like I guarantee you a company that needs it right now is him. Somebody should have sat in the corner and said, no, don't send that. Bro, don't send that.
Let's hold off on some bad tweets. That's for sure. So let's go West Coast. Tell me if I'm wrong about this. Lincoln Riley has a philosophical problem that he's too stubborn to change, because you go back and look at Oklahoma and even his 2 years at USC, it's like they don't even practice tackling. It's like, look, I believe in the mantra of defense doesn't win championships, just enough defense wins championships. And that's a moving target based on personnel, philosophy, all that other stuff. But Lincoln is too married to that philosophy. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. I just wonder now, are we going to finally see the change because he got rid of Alex Grinch? Like, is it something to where a new guy comes in there and Lincoln's willing to say, listen, I understand where my fault is. We keep seeing the same movie every year with Lincoln Riley. Like it's
It is.
whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's USC. Now, again, I hope he figures it out because I think Lincoln could be one of the greats if he does figure it out. And he knows balance is what wins. Like, I don't care if it's basketball. I don't care if it's baseball. I don't care if it's football. When you're playing in a sport where there's a postseason, where it's single elimination or a series, NCAA tournament's a great example. UConn could beat you 95-90, and they could beat you 66-61.
Yep.
They can win in multiple ways. We see this in football all the time. I always use the example of even the best offenses we've ever seen. LSU 2019. They needed that defense to beat Auburn. There were a couple games where the offense is not going to be operating at an unbelievably or incredibly efficient level. And you need that defense or special teams or defense and rebounding and free throw shooting or, the fielding behind the pitcher to make a couple great plays to be able to save you in a tight game. Sometimes, right, you got to be able to dribble with your left. And Lincoln not only can't dribble with his left, he doesn't go left. There is no left. It's just right. We're going to try and outscore you. And eventually that gets you beat. So I hope he's figured it out. But here's the problem. And I've been on teams like this. When you're an offensive guy, all right, and this is why I think what makes Sarkisian so impressive. Sark is an offensive guy. He's the play caller. But if you go watch their practices, he's everywhere at practice. He's on the defensive side. When they're going team, he'll root for the defense and the offense. He just wants good football. That's what he wants. And there's a balance there. It seems like USC with Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley had two head coaches. Lincoln Riley was the head coach of the offense, and Alex Grinch was the head coach of the defense. And when you do that, you cannot win, and you will not win. Nick Saban, a defensive coach. Everybody, when you're a chef, you always make that one great dish. But one great dish doesn't make a restaurant. The menu makes the restaurant. So I know Lincoln Riley knows this, Barrett. If we know this, Lincoln knows this. He's had to hear this from everywhere. But are you willing to change? What made Nick Saban so great, and what makes Kirby Smart so great, and the top coaches that are able to have these long-term successful runs, they're malleable even when they're at the top. Nick Saban cried and moaned about the hurry up, no huddle and the way the game was changing for 2 years.
And he was installing it at the same time.
And when he realized it wasn't going to change, regardless of how upset he got or whatever, he decided to just go be the best at it, even when he was at the top. That's the difference.
Yeah, you mentioned you referenced being a chef for USC. I view it like as a corporation. It's almost like Lincoln is the VP of marketing, Alex Grinch was the VP of operations, and there was no CEO overlooking the whole thing.
That's exactly right.
It's like, well, Lincoln, you actually have to have your hands in the cookie jar. I think a lot of it's almost like he took the CEO role a little too far, right? He's like, okay, well, I'm going to let my coaches coach, but only on the defensive side. Only can't do anything else. It's like frustrating because they can be so good, but I'm sick of watching 55-45 games at USC because they should be better. And I thought they would be better because I thought that Lincoln would be able to utilize the portal, utilize the West Coast and the recruiting base, and actually form a complete team. But he just doesn't try. He dubbed himself the king of the portal. And I'm looking around going, where? With Bear Alexander? Come on. Yeah. Like, he couldn't even start at Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, he's transferred more times than Western Union. But like you always say, you hear the saying, you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Well, you have two head coaches, you don't have one. And in fact, Lincoln Riley did the opposite of what has made Kyle Whittingham and Dan Lanning so successful in the Pac-12, right? What did they build their team on? Balance and physicality, right? You can't be Cirque du Soleil and win this thing. That's not how it works. So I hope Lincoln's figured it out. I think you have to change the way you go about things structurally. And that doesn't mean you can't call the plays, Barrett. That doesn't mean we see guys that are successful that call the plays. It's detaching yourself from saying, I'm an offensive guy that's the head coach of a football team. It's no, I'm a football guy that's the head coach of all the football team. And if Lincoln doesn't take that next step, then we're going to continue to see this over and over and over again. And USC is not a soft place. Like, that's the funny thing. I remember watching USC under Pete Carroll physically beat teams to death.
Yes.
It wasn't just the flash and sizzle. It was the hammer on the nail. I mean, they
went to Auburn in 2003 and absolutely
shut them out
up.
With a freshman quarterback in Matt Leinart.
And Herschel Dennis as the running back.
Man, I'm telling you, and he knows it. But again, it's one thing to know it, right? It's one thing to know I need to lose weight. It's another one to go get your ass on the treadmill.
Yeah. Well, I can't do the treadmill anymore. My knee. I do cycling.
Well, listen. Look, it's you get your Lance Armstrong on, Barrett, however you feel.
Right. Yeah. The doctor said I had arthritis, and I was like, can we just call it something else?
Well, the
Like,
funniest, like Louis C.K. is the funniest thing about this. He's like, when you're younger and like you hurt your ankle and you go to the doctor and they're like, hey man, we're going to fix this. We're going to go in there and do surgery and fix this. Then when you get older, when you're like 45 and you go in there, you're like, man, my ankle. He's like, yeah, no, you're just like this now.
right.
This is just you now.
This is not okay. This is not okay at all. So let's spin it forward with Georgia. Look, I don't like using the word dynasty for a team that doesn't have the national championship right now, because there only can be one ruler, right? There's only can be one ruling family. So you don't have to have a dynasty all the time. With that said, 2 national championships in 21 and 22. And then I think just by a circumstance of a bad landscape, Georgia doesn't make the playoff last year. But in reality, they might have been the best team in the country. So with Georgia now on the brink of that dynasty, I guess you could possibly say. And I think we all expect them to probably be number 1 preseason, could be number 2, whatever. Who is the biggest threat nationally to Georgia right now?
Nationally, if we're looking roster-wise, I do think it is Ohio State. I think Ohio State has the second best roster in college football. You look at what they added through the portal, and obviously the sense of urgency at Ohio State is at an incredible all-time high, not only just for Ryan Day, but for those players in that fan base too. I mean, Ryan Day looked at everybody and said, give me $13 million and I'll go win us a national championship. Well, you got $13 million.
More than that.
Yeah, you end up getting more than that. You get Michigan at home this year, right? When I look from a conference standpoint, and some people scoff at this, and that's okay. It's like I said, if I want to make people happy, I'd sell cookies and ice cream for a living. But I think in the conference, in the SEC, I think Ole Miss is the biggest threat to Georgia. And it's not that I think Ole Miss has the best team in the SEC. I think Georgia has the best team in the SEC. I think you can make an argument that Texas has a better roster than Ole Miss. I think you can make the argument that Alabama has a better roster than Ole Miss. But if you think about Georgia, they got embarrassed by Alabama in Atlanta last year, kept them out of the playoff. You think they're going to overlook that game? First off, it's Alabama, right? But you think they're going to overlook that game on the road? What's a better way to kind of regain your dominance other than to go and beat them at their place, right? To make up for that loss. Then you got Texas coming to the SEC for the first time. They're walking into the prison. Somebody's got to punch them in the face first. And Georgia's the biggest, baddest in the prison right now. So they're not going to overlook that one. But then you look at Ole Miss right there. People say, I don't care what you say, all right, to the common fan, to the common person, to probably the common SEC player, the name Ole Miss does not strike the fear of God in you the way that Alabama and Texas does. You can do all the mental gymnastics you want. You can try and say it, but people still view Ole Miss kind of like the way they view USC right now. Really good on offense. Can't tackle anybody on defense, even though last year they led the league in turnover margin. They were one of the tops in the league at disruption in the backfield. And I think LSU and Ole Miss have traded places. I think Ole Miss is now the more complete team with dynamic players on offense and a defense that is capable and a defensive line and a front seven that is capable. And LSU is now just the high-flying offense that goes out there and tries to outscore you, which I'm telling you right now, Ole Miss gets Georgia at home. That game, remember last year, Jackson Dart was hurt. The offense didn't play very well. And Ole Miss doesn't have it's always a tough schedule in the SEC, but you have lighter and heavier ones. When you look at Ole Miss, their schedule's a lot lighter than a lot of the other ones. And you look at Georgia's, as good as they are, I mean, you got Clemson off the rip. You've got Bama on the road. I mean, you've got Texas. You've got to go to Ole Miss. I mean, it's I think Ole Miss is dangerous within the conference, but Ohio State on the periphery.
Yeah, and I think underrated part of Ole Miss is the fact that they actually are pretty talented at running back. I know losing Quinshon Judkins is tough, but I think Bentley and Diggs, they're both pretty darn solid. Getting back to Ohio State, I agree with you that they're the biggest threat to Georgia. I will say this, though, 2 things. One, whenever you have a team saying like hashtag unfinished business or whatever, the same thing happened with Clemson in 2018, Georgia in 21, Florida State last year. That matters in this day and age. When you have veterans that come back and say, hey, I want to be a part of this and I want to continue and build and finally finish things off, that's big. And Ohio State has that. My holdup with Ohio State is that I don't think Will Howard is very good. I think he was not going to start at Kansas State. Avery Johnson basically unseated him. And I think right now it's up to Ryan Day to make a decision and not necessarily view it as experience versus talent. To me, if I'm Ohio State, I would consider Will Howard like Tyler Buckner last year. The guy you come in, you really think he's okay and can provide some stability, but you don't really want him to be the starting quarterback because I don't think he can win at that level. I do think Julian Sayin can. I do think Aaron Nolan can. I'm not necessarily sure about Devin, but I think to me, Will Howard's not going to win you a national championship. Other guys in that depth chart, on that depth chart, can. And I wonder if Ryan Day, how he's going to use Will Howard. Is he going to be a starter, or is he going to be like Tyler Buckner?
Yeah, well, they say in NASCAR, you don't have to have the best driver. You just have to have the best car. I think what Will Howard's got to be able to do is not run the car into the wall. Don't be the difference, be the reason. I don't think they're going to – I think the RPO game is something that's going to open up a lot more for Ohio State. I think they're going to be a little bit different offensively this year with his running ability. Devin Brown, I haven't seen enough from him throwing the ball to be like, yeah, he definitely can do it, and the other guys are young. When I look at Ohio State, I do see they have both their tackles and their center coming back. The offensive line should be really good. The skill position, I mean, at this point, it's just hilarious how talented Ohio State is. On the outside, we know they're going to be good at running back. And then defensively, I think this has a chance to be the best defense in the country that Ohio State has returning when you look at it from the front to the back. And then you add Caleb Downs from Alabama as well, who I think is the best DB in the country. I don't care what anybody says coming into 2024. So it comes to the point of, yes, would you love to have the best quarterback in the country? Of course you would. To marry it up with what Ohio State has. If you're Ohio State, it's almost unfortunate because you could have the best team you've had in a long time and be the worst you've been in a while at quarterback. I just wonder, all those people that were trashing Kyle McCord last year, who went 11-1.
Yep.
11-1. And I know they had some Lambos on the outside. Just look at the NFL draft. They got some more coming back with Jeremiah and those other guys. And then you look at the tight end position, they're talented. I think Will just has to not screw it up, which is a lot easier said than done. And I'll be interested to see Ryan Day and the amount of risk that he's willing to take on early downs throwing the ball. That's the part that I'm interested to see.
All right, last thing. Billy Napier has the worst schedule on the planet, and it's not just the SEC. It's Miami, it's Florida State, it's UCF, which I think UCF is going to be way better than people realize. But I hate to put a number on it because I won't with Florida, because there could be a 7-5 that feels way different than another 7-5.
Yes.
Right. So if you're Florida and you're the athletic director, if you're Foley or not Foley, if you're Strickland or if you're Ben Sass, the president, what do you want to see from Florida just to be content with keeping him?
Well, and Barrett, you're 100% correct. Every 7-5 is not made the same. Every 8-4 is not made the same. I think if Florida needs to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat, that they need to beat somebody that nobody thinks they have a chance to beat. I think he can get away with 7 if that happens. But the main thing is, you've got to put a competent product out on the field. I think what's hurt Billy Napier the most, and look, it's Florida. The standard is incredibly high, and it should be. We've seen how good Florida can be, and we know how talented that state is alone just in high school recruiting, let alone being the national brand that they are. But it's the way that they've lost, right? And I'll give you a great example. Utah, game 1 last year. Utah comes out, score a touchdown. You score one right back. You stop them, should have a 3-and-out. It's 4th and 4. And you have 2 guys with the number 12 jersey go out on punt return. On 4th and 4, it's a 5-yard penalty. They get a first down, score a touchdown on that drive. And that ended up being kind of the pulling away point where it felt like Florida was always catching up. It seems like they're not organized. That's what because you cannot win if you are not organized. And the penalties, right? I thought Graham Mertz played way better than I expected him to last year. And in reality, they had a top 50 offense in the country. So it wasn't like the product was just awful, but you have got to stop. Look, if you're going to lose because you just got beat, not because you beat yourself. So if I had to put a number on it, at least if it's going to be 7, it better be the right 7. You better beat somebody you're not supposed to, and it better look good and clean and crisp around there, and you should handle business against the teams you're supposed to handle. But Barrett, last year we're sitting here saying, all right, well, they're probably not going to fire Billy Napier, last year because they don't want that new coach to inherit this 2024 schedule in his first year when you're probably going to get gutted by the portal and start off on the wrong foot. Well, go look at 2025. It's not getting any easier. It's pretty much the same thing. You're just flipping where you're going on the road and at home. So I think they want every avenue they can possibly pursue to keep Billy Napier. They are hoping for that. I don't think it's hey, we want to fire this guy. Let's let him get his ass beat this year, and then we'll fire him. I think they're going to try and do everything they can to hold on, and I hope Billy figures it out because I do think Billy has a chance to be a good football coach. It's just you can't look incompetent. It's like they say, fat and slow is a bad way to go through life.
Yes, it is. Well, and I would say, to add on, you can't go 0-2 against Miami and UCF.
No,
you got to get at least one of those. You got to get at least one of those.
Florida State going undefeated didn't help either.
No, it did not. There's no doubt about that. Jake, it's awesome to talk to you. You're always welcome on this show. You do a great job over at Daily Wire on Crain and Company. Tell everybody how they can get you.
Well, same thing here, Barrett. We love when you come on the show. You always kill it. Our audience loves you. Yeah, look, if you like listening to Barrett, which if you don't, that's a you problem, then you're going to love checking out Crain and Company. Go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Daily Wire Plus, CRAINN Company. We go live each weekday morning, 6:30 a.m. Central to 8 a.m. We have live calls and a live chat. Talk a little bit of everything, but look, we know football's the big bad wolf. We know that. But Barrett, it's always fun, buddy. And come on, Braves. All right, I know we got a long way to go. Let's get back
offense.
On a little, just a little bit. Come on, Matt Olson, figure it out.
I want Matt Olson over 200, like baby steps, just over 200.
The good thing is we have 411 regular season games left, so there's plenty of time for the Braves to figure it out.
It's been too long without an offense, though. Just saying.
Very true.
This is getting annoying. Jake, appreciate it.
Anytime, buddy.
So this is going to be a little bit rapid fire. And like I said, if you have comments, leave them in the comment section. I'll get to them. But a little bit rapid fire, and not necessarily rapid fire, I should say, because there are, six, I should say, quarterbacks we're going to get into here on the show. So it's going to take a little while. Like these shows generally are 23 minutes. That's kind of how this is done on the Believe Network. So we're going to try to get all these guys in over the course of that time frame. So without further ado, let's go right off the bat. Michael Vogel, Pro Football Scout for FTSN, wants to know about Riley Leonard. Thinks Riley Leonard is going to be the guy who comes out of nowhere and contends for the Heisman Trophy. And of course, Riley got banged up at Duke, transferred to Notre Dame, kind of following the Sam Hartman path from ACC to South Bend. Look, I like Riley Leonard a lot. I think this is actually a very, very good pick to contend for the Heisman Trophy. He has the talent. We've seen that. We saw that at Duke under Mike Elko. The dude is phenomenal, whether it be through the air or on the ground. Now he's banged up, but he's got all that you need to contend for the Heisman Trophy. He's in a very high-profile place at Notre Dame. He's got the chance to put up video game stats, and he has the chance to lead his team to the college football playoff. Those are the three things that when I'm voting for the Heisman Trophy, and I am a Heisman Trophy voter, I kind of check those boxes, right? Video game stats, check. Leading your team potentially to the meaningful postseason, check. And are you just flat out good? Are you just flat out good? Are you the MVP of the team? Would the team crumble without you? I think Riley Leonard is sort of a check, because I do think that Notre Dame would be good without him. And that's the thing that's working against Riley Leonard in this discussion. How important is he to their playoff run? Because I think Notre Dame, and we've said this on this show a lot, pretty much every single year, Notre Dame's going to make the college football playoff, whether it's Riley Leonard or Sam Hartman or quarterback X to be named later up in South Bend. It's set up well for them, because I know this is shocking to a lot of people, and Notre Dame's the most polarizing program in college football. Well, generally speaking, maybe it's Colorado now, but whatever. Notre Dame is usually properly rated preseason. I know folks want to say, no, they're not. They're always overrated. No, they pretty much are properly rated. If you go back and look at where they are in the AP top 25 before the season and where they end up, usually it's about right. And so I fully expect Notre Dame to be a top 10, 12, 15 team preseason. The schedule sets up well. USC is not what it normally is. The trip to Texas A&M in the opener is going to be a lot of fun. But if you're talking about a 10-2 Notre Dame team, which I think is very fair, especially with Riley Leonard at quarterback, then you're talking about a playoff team. So Riley's going to have the visibility. He's going to be important for his team to go to the meaningful postseason. And in that system with Marcus Freeman and flat out his skills, then yes, I believe Riley Leonard can be a Heisman candidate. With that said, and this is, I think, where the conversation needs to be addressed, the question I asked on X is which quarterback will come out of nowhere to contend for the Heisman Trophy. I don't think Riley Leonard will come out of nowhere. Does he count? I don't think so. Everybody knows about Riley Leonard. Everybody knows how good he can be. Everybody knows what he did at Duke. So how much of a surprise would it be if he contended for the Heisman Trophy? To me, the only thing holding him back, the only reason maybe to doubt him would be, is he 100%? Or what is his new 100%? I guess that's more important. What is his new 100%? Because it might be different than it was when he's healthy. We don't know. We have to see that. We'll see that on opening night against Texas A&M, but I don't think he comes out of nowhere. I think he's already in the discussion. I think that highly of Riley Leonard. I'm sorry. That was a terrible rhyme. I shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be friends with me. You're smart. I'm dumb. I apologize. Kevin Vallone with the Vol capitalized. Nico, and it's not close. Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. Vol Twitter, I love Nico. I really do. I love Nico. What he did in the bowl game, though, was not as big as it's sort of being made out to be. Sure, he scored twice on the ground. I get it. But did he have this monster record-setting game? Not really. With that said, and the question that I think is being asked all over, certainly in SEC country, but I think anybody who's even talking about Nico is whether he's Joe Milton, who had a pretty good Orange Bowl 2 years ago and then kind of tanked last year, or is he Hendon Hooker, a transfer who comes in and lights the world on fire? Like, that is ultimately the question that will determine Tennessee's season, right? And he's more Hendon Hooker than he is Nico Iamaleava. I'm sorry. That's his name. Nico is more Hendon Hooker than he is Joe Milton. Because what did we know about Joe Milton? He only had a fastball. What do we know about Nico Iamaleava? Higher ceiling. We haven't seen whether he can make every single throw. But we know he has that in his bag. So he's going to make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. He's going to make mistakes. But judging from his high school film, he's got a more versatile repertoire than Joe Milton. So to me, he's more Hendon Hooker. Plus, he's in a system that fits his skill set. Now, it fit Joe Milton's skill set too, but Joe Milton didn't have a curveball. He didn't have a changeup. I think Nico does. Now, when we're talking about the Heisman Trophy, getting back to my checklist, getting back to what I think about when I'm voting for the Heisman Trophy, and yes, I am a voter. How valuable is he for the team? Very valuable. Without Nico, they're not contending. Is he going to put up video game stats? Yeah, he will, especially in that system. Does he lead his team to the college football playoff or just overall team success? That, my friends, is where we run into a little bit of a roadblock. Is Tennessee going to make the college football playoff? Right now, I think they're a fringe team. And if you're a fringe team right now, you're basically just throwing your hands up in the air and saying, well, what does the landscape give us? Because that's what really matters. What does the landscape give us? So ultimately, that is what's going to make or break Nico's Heisman campaign. Can they get off that fringe and be legitimately in the mix in November, in late November? That's what it's going to be. But would he qualify as coming out of nowhere to make a Heisman Trophy run? Absolutely. No doubt about it. It would be completely out of nowhere. The dude hasn't done an awful lot in college at all. So yeah, he qualifies. Could I see it happening? Yes. I think right now Tennessee is one of those bubble teams. I think if Nico gets hot, then yes, he might be able to lead them to the back end of that college football playoff. Again, it's kind of what the landscape gives you. So it's hard to sort of predict exactly what Tennessee will be, and the video game stats will be there. There's no doubt in my mind that the video game stats will be there. JFV _ golf TR on X. Cameron Rising in big time caps. Cam Rising. Tell you, I would love to see it. I'd love to see it. Dude's been through a lot. Dude has been through a lot throughout his career, but we've seen what kind of player he can be. One of the most dynamic players in the country when he's healthy. When he's healthy, there's no doubt about that. Again, sort of with Nico, what's his new 100%? He played in the spring a little bit. Sounds like he's a full go. That's fantastic. What is his full go? That's the biggest question. Video game stats? Yes. Talent and value to his team? Yes. Can he lead his team to the college football playoff? Again, with Nico, that's where we get into a question. Can Utah make the college football playoff in the Big 12? If Texas and Oklahoma were in the conference, no. They're not, though. Who's the power in that conference? Oklahoma State? Yeah. West Virginia? I like West Virginia. We'll talk about the West Virginia quarterback coming up in a second, actually. But there's no power. There's no superpower that can jump up, win the conference, and most likely earn one of those top 4 seeds, because I don't think there's going to be a group of 5 team that jumps up and is a top 4 conference champion. So somebody in the Big 12 is going to be a top 4 seed. Why not Utah? Why not Utah? Now, this would be a team that can get in but not win it. We've seen a lot of teams like that before. Michigan State in 2015 is a perfect example. But Kelly Bryant, when he was the quarterback at Clemson, we've seen those teams before. But the Heisman Trophy is voted on before the college football playoff. So does it matter? Nope, it does not. So this is a good pick. I really like this pick. I think when all is said and done, yeah, he would come out of nowhere. I don't think there's any doubt that this would qualify as somebody coming out of nowhere. Not because people don't know who he is. I think a lot of people do know who he is. But with the injury, what are the expectations? What are the expectations? To me, I think nationally, the expectation would be, good, not great. Good, not great. That's not the way it should be. But let's be honest about who Heisman Trophy voters are. I'm a voter, but I follow college football 24/7, 365. There are a lot of other voters who don't. They're national media members. They are focused on the NBA right now. They will be focused almost exclusively on the NFL in the fall. There are a lot of them. There are even voters who don't even work in sports anymore, or at least in sports media. Do they know who Cam Rising is right now? Probably not. And if they do, they just know his name. They don't know his game. Sorry, another rhyme. I apologize. I really do. I do not, look, y'all, I do not mean to do that. I really don't. I do not mean to do that. But I think, yeah, he qualifies as coming out of nowhere. Tyler, Ray21 Tyler on X. Cade Klubnik. Exhaustive sigh. If you're not watching, that was an exhaustive sigh. Look, I was in the building Labor Day night 2 years ago when Clemson played Georgia Tech, and DJ Uiagalelei was the Clemson quarterback, but everybody wanted to know about Cade Klubnik because DJU was not viewed as favorably as he was the year before. And when Cade Klubnik came out, I think it was either late in the first half or early in the second half. I mean, the roar from the Clemson fans was unbelievable. The hype was there. He has not lived up to it. Basically, he's DJU just a couple years after DJU. And so I don't think he can come out of nowhere because, well, in theory, he would qualify because not many people are expecting a lot from him. So, yeah, he would qualify in that regard. But again, let's go down my checklist. Video game stats, he should, but in that system, is he capable of it? I don't know. I don't think so. Does it matter? Not really, because I think the ACC is down. So Clemson making a college football playoff run and potentially being a top 4 seed, I think is absolutely possible and maybe probable at this point, but it won't be because of Klubnik. It'll be because of the defense. I don't think he's capable of video game stats. With that said, yes, they can make the playoff. In fact, I think they should make the playoff, but it won't be because of Klubnik. Now, if I'm wrong, and that's the biggest thing, if I'm wrong, then yeah, go ahead and book that plane ticket to New York City. He will be in New York, and he might dang near win it. But I just don't think he's capable of that. I don't think he's capable of just being a stat monster. I think Clemson, if they're going to do something, it's going to be old school, which is fine. Like, they can do that. They've done a good job of that in the past. I'm just not buying Cade as being as much of a power as he needs to be in order to make a run to New York. Ryan Fernandez on Facebook. Clemson fans know what a good QB looks like. Trust the roar. That was the roar 2 years ago that I mentioned. But nobody has seen him yet. That's the thing, is when that happened, nobody had seen him yet. He was just sort of this mythical character. And now he's not. And people have seen it, and I don't know if people like it. Same thing with DJU. People had saw a glimpse of it when Trevor was out with COVID during the COVID year, when DJU went up and put up video game numbers at Notre Dame, even though they lost. But we hadn't seen Klubnik at all. That was when the hype was there. And then I think a lot of people fell out of love with him very, very quickly. Here we go with a guy who you absolutely should know. And if you don't, you should. Garrett Green, GG6 from West Virginia. This is RJ2, Robe the Boss on X. Garrett Green, the signal caller for the West Virginia Mountaineers. Buy. Buy all the stock you can with Garrett Green. You talk about a guy who is one of the most dynamic players in college football. Yes, that is him. If you look at some of these Pro Football Focus lists of players who are the best quarterbacks in the country, yes, Garrett Green is on that list with a bunch of guys you already know. Garrett Green is an NFL caliber quarterback. Go ask any scout. And you might not know him. You should, but you might not. So could he make a run at the Heisman Trophy out of nowhere? Yes, he could. The problem, going back to my little checklist of things I look for as a voter, is West Virginia capable of making a college football playoff run? This might come as a shock. Yes. The answer is yes. Why? Because it's in the Big 12, and we have no freaking clue what's going to happen in the Big 12 this year. Not one. Not a single clue. And we vote on the Heisman Trophy after championship weekend before the playoff starts. So is West Virginia capable of winning the playoff? No. Are they capable of getting to the playoff out of the Big 12 and potentially securing one of those top 4 seeds? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And you know what Heisman Trophy voters like? Magical runs out of nowhere. Garrett Green can be that guy. He absolutely can be that guy. So does he qualify? Absolutely. Video game stats, if you haven't seen it, look it up. Value to his team. Yeah, big time value to his team. If he's not there, West Virginia goes nowhere. Could he lead his team to overall team success? Yes. In the Big 12, yes. In another conference, probably not. But reality is reality, folks. It's just the way it is. So yeah, he'd qualify, and I love it. I can't wait to see him play. We had Neil Brown on the show a couple weeks ago, and if you have not watched that episode, go back and watch it. Neil breaks down basically everything that went on during spring practice with the Mountaineers, and there's a lot to be excited about in Morgantown. All right, last one before we hang up the headset that I'm not wearing right now. Garrett Nussmeier, this from Will Dunn, at Real Will Dunn on X. Garrett Nussmeier. All right. LSU quarterback, won it last year in Jayden Daniels. Nussmeier is not Jayden Daniels. He does not run like Jayden Daniels, period. Is he a willing runner? Yeah. But is the offense going to look the same? No. A, because Jayden Daniels isn't there and he's a different kind of quarterback than Garrett Nussmeier. And B, is a change in offensive coordinator. So with Garrett Nussmeier, yes, he's up on a lot of these lists. I mentioned Pro Football Focus with Garrett Green. Nussmeier's on those lists too. And if you look at the Vegas odds, like on BetOnline, you can see that he's up there too. He's in consideration in those odds. I'm not willing to put him there yet. I'm not willing to put him there yet. And there are a couple reasons why. Yes, LSU can make a run to the playoffs. So check that box, right? Is he capable of putting up video game stats? I don't know. Nobody does. It's a completely different LSU offense. You lose Neighbors. You obviously lose Jayden Daniels. I'm not willing to put Garrett Nussmeier in that situation. But also, will he have to be in that situation? And ultimately, that's the question for LSU this year. Does Garrett Nussmeier have to put up video game stats? Because that all depends on the defense. Jayden Daniels had to last year. There's no doubt Jayden Daniels had to be what he was last year. Otherwise, LSU wouldn't win any games. That might be different this year. They might dial it down a little bit because why get crazy if you don't have to, if your defense is at least going to keep you in games? So I'm not sold on Garrett Nussmeier coming out of nowhere to be a Heisman Trophy favorite or Heisman Trophy contender right now because we don't know what he's going to be. We don't know what he's going to have to do. We don't know what that offense will look like. We can guess, and that's totally fine. That's why I like this kind of show, because everyone's going to have different opinions, and that's great. We love that. But I do think that's a little aggressive, at least at 10:22 a.m. Eastern time on Friday, May 10th. Things could change. Got a whole lot of offseason left, don't we? Joined now by a good friend. You know him as a Fox News contributor, a guy who I've been friends with for a very long time. He is Joey Jones. Joey, what's going on?
Not much, man. Thanks for inviting me on. Listen, I talk about, politics that can be divided for a living. So thanks for bringing
Right.
me onto a platform that's way more divided, a sports platform. So it's the pressure's on today.
Yeah, well, I wanted to bring you on because you're a Georgia fan. You're from Northwest Georgia, around
Yeah.
Dalton. So, and I've known you for like you're passionate about Georgia. You're passionate about sports. We've run into each other at Braves games a lot as well. So and I just like bringing my friends on the show. So that's always good. But first, before we get into the sports angle, people probably know you. They probably know you from your injury and your time at Fox as well. So I guess introduce where you've been, who you are, how you got into the military, and what ultimately happened to you.
Yeah, if you're familiar with the Southeast or with Northwest Georgia, a lot of folks know if you go south on Chattanooga, you'll cross a town called Dalton on 75, and it's just like carpet signs, buy carpet here, buy carpet there. So that was me. I was born and raised in Carpet Town, USA, Dalton, Georgia, and didn't really do much in Atlanta or around Atlanta, but my dad was a diehard Braves fan. He was a bigger Falcons fan probably than I am, and we all understand why that is right now. But my dad was a diehard Braves fan, and he loved football. College football wasn't on his radar as much, so I found my fandom for Georgia on my own in high school. But yeah, I served 8 years in the Marine Corps, and when you join the military, I joined not knowing anything about the Marine Corps. I had no idea. Like my family were moonshiners. If they did public service of any kind, it was because they got in trouble over the weekend and they were picking up trash. I mean, we just didn't have that. And so when I joined the Marine Corps, I didn't know anything about it. In my 8 years in the Marine Corps, I ended up becoming an EOD tech or a bomb tech. And on August 2010, my second deployment, first to Afghanistan, I stepped on a bomb and it took my legs off above the knee on each side, hurt my arms real bad, and punctured a lung, all those things, and took a while to recover up in DC. And so that's kind of my military background. I parlayed that in a very unique way into a career that touched politics but became media. And so I spent plenty of time in the nonprofit sector. I worked on the administrative side, and then also as kind of a spokesperson, and that's how I honed those skills that parlayed into media. But I've just learned that when I'm passionate about something, I can't ignore it. And if you're going to be passionate about something and you're going to be active in it, say advocating for veterans or hunting and fishing, whatever it is your passions are, it's good to just educate yourself. So I spent 10, 15 years learning. I went on campaign trails and saw how I worked on Capitol Hill and saw how laws are made and culture is reflected in how we govern ourselves. And now, all that's coming to a head because the only kind of bastion I had left in my life that wasn't political in some way was the sports, especially college football. And now we have, potential legislation coming and all these things happening. So it touches everything, man.
There's no doubt, and it is administrative season in our world of college football, which is hard to follow in this day and age. I've always been fascinated by something, and I know other people have. I've actually talked about it with people. In in sports, when you're overseas, we see in big games when the national anthem is played, they cut to shots from in Afghanistan when we were there, or Germany, or wherever, where there are army Marines, anywhere, anybody, standing up in front of the American flag, during the national anthem. And I've always thought that was really cool because it shows to me that you guys are human, right? Like you actually have passions outside of what you're doing. So, what is it like being a sports fan overseas, especially a college football fan? Because, to me, I would guess there are a lot of college football fans overseas. But what's it like being a sports fan and using that as sort of an escape?
Yeah, I'll start with an analogy because I talk in riddles, I guess. But, when I grew up in the first 18 years of my life here in Georgia, I didn't listen to a lot of country music because I lived that every day. So there was no like nostalgia, no missing home there. As soon as I joined the Marine Corps, I went to Japan, Hawaii, California, and I listened to country music all the time. So your college football fandom is amplified the same way. I mean, in the South, we're kind of, we're simple, right? It's like the University of Georgia, the University of Tennessee, Alabama. I mean, you've got Auburn and Vanderbilt, but for the most part, you've got the name of the state right there in the college. And so it becomes a part of your identity. When you're in a platoon of 30 guys and gals, or for me, guys, wherever you're from is a part of your identity. You can bet the two guys from Boston, Tachi and Andresi, the Italian and the Irishman, you can bet being a Red Sox and a Pats fan was huge. Well, it's the same thing for the guys from the SEC. Like, I'm the Georgia guy in the platoon. I'm a Georgia fan. It's a part of my identity. So it's amplified on the college football stage. And I think that's why, like, I can tell you, you go to a Marine Corps base in California and you're going to see as many Georgia tags on the front of somebody's truck as you will, going down to Atlanta. And it's because when you're away from home, you miss it and you want people to know who you are and where you're from. I will say, like, I went to Iraq in 2007 and 8, and we had access to TV and the internet pretty readily available there. I went to Afghanistan in 2010, and it was much different. So my 2007-8 deployment, that's when the Bulldogs rushed the end zone at Florida. That's when Georgia had a couple of big games, but then kind of fell short there. And just overall, my time in the Marine Corps was when Mark Richt was coach, so we knew we could win 10 or 11 games, just not the big ones.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me that, you have college football. Like, when you were over there, did you find yourself maybe learning about other sports, people from, like you said, Boston, who are Red Sox fan or hockey fans? Do you ever find yourself just kind of sitting around and listening to other people's stories and saying, wow, you have the same passion that I do, just in a world that is completely separate from my Southern roots?
I'll tell you this, college football is king no matter what the group setting is. So there were fans of other schools, but they eventually had to pick up a Georgia or an Alabama or an SC or a Texas at that time, because that really was the big conversation. I did when I was in DC after I was injured, I went to some Capitals games and absolutely loved it. So I've got an affection for hockey, but because we don't grow up playing it, the context isn't there. So the passion it's hard to create passion. It's just there. Like, for example, I went to the Falcons Super Bowl in Houston, and ever since then I've been heartbroken. But if they had a good season, I'd be just as passionate again. And so, you're kind of born with it. And I think, like, in the South specifically, there is a huge emphasis on state pride. Like, I'm from Georgia. And so in the Northeast, I think it's a little bit different. I mean, you got the New England Patriots, and then you go to New York and there's like 4 teams, between the baseball and NFL. And so it's almost, that state pride of, that's who I am. I'm one of those people. We have a culture. I mean, everybody's chasing Texas on that because it is so unique. But I think in the Southeast, especially, college football rises to the top for that reason. After that, I'd say the MLB is probably a big deal. I mean, NFL fans to me are more regional. It's Northeast and Midwest.
Yeah.
And college football is kind of everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I didn't know you went to the Super Bowl. I had some friends some other friends that went too. What was that like? Like, what was that? What was the end of that game like in person?
What was crazy is I went with Nate Boyer, who, for those of you that don't know, he played as a long snapper and like a third string DB for the University of Texas for 4 years. But what they don't, what some people may not know is he did it as a 30-year-old Army veteran. And so he walked on, Mac Brown gave him a spot, and he earned a starting role. And so Nate's got this really cool story. He went up and did preseason with the Seattle Seahawks, actually. So he's got a little bit of NFL experience. And we went there together. We were doing stuff, and people, when you go to the Super Bowl, there's this whole circus the week before of media and events. And so we ended up with 2 seats, and we're sitting there, and he's cheering for the Falcons because he doesn't have a reason not to, and he knows I am. At halftime, 28-3. So what do? I get up and I go buy a T-shirt for every member of my family. I probably spent $300 on T-shirts.
Oh,
it takes a while to get back in my seat. I've got a big gulp Pepsi with the logo on it for each of us. By the time I get back to Nate and hand him his drink, I think the game we're up by 7 or the game is tied. It's right about the point of that crazy catch between the legs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, what in the world just happened? Like, I wanted to just leave those T-shirts sitting there. Like, I wasn't heartbroken. My jaw was on the floor. It's like, how did this even happen? Because I didn't see the third quarter. And but I'll tell you, walking out, I think the Patriots fans are just so used to winning. They weren't even obnoxious. Like, I went to the Georgia-Texas Sugar Bowl, and after the game, the Texas fans were just outright mean. But after the Super Bowl there with the Falcons, like, they didn't. The Patriots fans were like, good try, good job, little buddy. That's all.
Pat you on the head, move
cool.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. But
That's
no,
wild.
it was fun.
I was not there. I remember just when the coin toss happened, I was just kind of huddled in the fetal position in the corner going, I know exactly what's going to happen right now.
Uh,
That was a bad night. So you do work at Fox News, and you are
yeah.
up in New York a lot. But you have people from all around in the media business. I know there are some Georgia fans up there. I think Mary Catherine Ham's a big one. But what's it like, sort of being passionate about college football, sort of in a business environment that probably is not necessarily accustomed to your kind of passion in the college world?
It's not as fun as it was in the Marine Corps, I'll tell you that. You know, in the Marine Corps, like every day my friendship was challenged with the Alabama fan, you know. But up there they're Northeast. So I've got one coworker, Todd Pyro, big New York sports fan. So I think
Mhm.
he's Giants, and I can't remember if he's Mets or Yankees, maybe both. And so he'll want to talk sports, but when it comes to college football, he just knows kind of those top end headlines because he's not watching. We do have, it's really crazy. So the media school at Georgia, I can't think of the name of it right now. It's a pretty good school. So we have, I think, 3 producers on our morning show that are University of Georgia grads, 2 if not 3. And so it's cool when we are doing well. I wear my Georgia lapel pin. There's a little Power G right here, and
Mhm.
when I'm hosting on Saturdays and Georgia's going to play, and I'll end the show and I'll kind of yell out "Go Dogs" as the show's fading away, and I little things, you can't do it too much or you're gonna, it's gonna be too much. It's a news show, but I make sure that people know that I'm a Bulldogs fan, and it's fun once the season gets going because then I've got producers coming in. We've got a guy, Mark Meredith, that covers the White House. He went to Georgia, and so we actually have a pretty good representation up there, the state of Georgia and then the University of Georgia as well. One of my co-hosts I work with most is a guy named Will Kane. A lot of sports fans know him. He was with ESPN for a long time. He's a big Texas fan. So last year was difficult for me because I've had the Braves over him, I've had UGA over him, and then last year you have an All Texas World Series, and you have the University of Texas essentially winning the SEC by beating Alabama, and Alabama beating Georgia. So
Yeah, I've actually been on Will Kane's show, and we talked a lot about Texas. I guess what's the conversation with him like?
yeah.
Because Texas is moving into the SEC. Do y'all get into it a little bit?
You know, he's a nice guy. So he doesn't talk smack. He's kind of like almost fake humble right up until Texas is really making it happen. And then it's more of a I told you so. So I hate those kind because I just want to bring the firepower. You know, I want to tell you all the
Right.
reasons Texas sucks. And he won't do that about Georgia. You know, he just kind of lets the game decide.
So back-to-back national championships. We'll move on the field right now. Back-to-back national championships. Just for you, being a Dalton guy, kind of going through what you've been through and sort of spreading that love for Georgia around through your platoon and through everybody else in the military. What was that like with back-to-back national championships in your world?
Man, that first one was just insane. You know, and I think what I've learned, and to the Alabama fan base, they're going to roll their eyes at this because they've known it for a long time, or maybe they don't feel that way at all. That first one was so special. I don't think I appreciated the second one at all. Like, I think
Mhm.
it was like the I don't even want to say it was expected. It just, I mean, we were still riding high on the first one in 40 years. And so it was one of those things where it's like, well, how do you celebrate 2 in a row with Stetson Bennett, a homegrown guy, and then it becomes, well, does that mean anything less than a national championship is disappointing? I mean, winning the Sugar Bowl is kind of a big deal. Winning the Orange Bowl is kind of a big deal, and so it's been fun to have that problem, though. It's been fun to have a problem to where college football is as difficult and competitive as ever to win in. And we want to know if not winning the national championship should be a disappointment or not.
Well, this year you're going to find out, I think, because the
Yeah.
expectations are super high. When you look at Georgia going into this year, is it national championship or bust in your mind?
No, it can't be. It's a 12-team playoff, and a lot of people look at that and say, well, that means there's more opportunities to get in. There's also that many more games to get kicked out and to have a bad game. If you go back and watch the Georgia Alabama SEC championship last year, Georgia was not the team that had been the 2 previous years, but they also were pretty beat up. I mean, Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey both were pretty beat up. And then we had our offensive lineman was out. I'm losing his name right now. So, that game was really close with Alabama. I think throughout the season, Georgia was a better team. But then you go back and look at the 2 years where they won the national championship, and you see games where just everything fell Georgia's way. And you take a step back and go, hey, that's football. So if it kind of averages out that way, 12-team playoff, any team can catch fire and any team can be beat up. That I actually would prefer it stay a 4-team or 2-team championship because – last year, if you had a 2-team championship, who do you put in? Maybe Florida State gets more consideration for being completely undefeated in a 2-team model. Maybe they just take all the drama out. I'm not sure, but I like it. I mean, at 2 teams, if my team's 3rd or 4th, I can complain, but I also get to go enjoy a bowl game. At 12 teams, those New Year's Six games, I don't know how they're going to be important. I don't know how you keep a trophy case for a winning a round of 12 or a round of 8 game. To me, it's scary. I'm not going to talk it down, but it's scary for me, even as a guy who has a team that hopefully is on top.
And this is why we're friends, because we are in agreement about the postseason. You are not part of the postseason expansionist complex. It's everyone's pushing it that direction. Minimalism is good. All right, you can't say you don't know, because now the city and state of Georgia, we used to be Losersville. Now we have championships. We have the Braves World Series. Georgia has 2 national championships. You have to pick one in 2024/2025, because that's when Georgia would play in the national championship. Braves World Series or Georgia national championship?
The one I want or the one I think will happen? The one I want would probably be
the
Georgia national championship. The Georgia national championship, just because Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC, Alabama fans finally having a chance to go into Tuscaloosa favored. I want Georgia to meet all those expectations. My fear with the Braves is they've started out too strong, and that's never good for the Braves fandom to start out strong like that.
Yeah, I think the Braves will get it done though. The bats need to get going though. As a guy who hosts the Braves Report on AJC, last week has been a little depressing on the show, but hopefully that'll change. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on, giving a little different sports perspective, a different college football perspective, because, we can sit here and make lists all day long in the off season. Who are the best quarterbacks? I try to do something different, and I appreciate you hopping on because I do think your story is interesting. And honestly, just being a sports fan in the military to me is something that I've always been curious about. So, Joey, appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
That'll do it for this edition of the College Football Smothered and Covered Weekend Feast. This show brought to you by BetOnline. You can go to betonline.ag and see all that they have to offer. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.